Some people say I love you with flowers, others say it with words, but the most emotionally avoidant souls, they say it in silence, through actions you never noticed until now. If you've ever felt unloved by someone who pulls away just when things get close, stay with me, because the truth is, they might love you deeper than you ever imagined, they just don't know how to say it. Avoidants often get misunderstood because of how they manage emotional closeness. On the surface, it looks like they're pulling away, shutting down, or even rejecting love. But in reality, something entirely different is happening underneath, something deeper, something rooted in their nervous system, their past, and their longing for safety. See, what most people don't realize is this: avoidants don't run from you. They run from the fear of losing control. Love, closeness, and emotional vulnerability, those things are beautiful for some, but terrifying for them. Not because they don't care, but because they care too much, and their body doesn't know how to handle the intensity of that connection. So, instead of expressing love the way others do through constant words, frequent presence, or emotional openness, avoidants create love through safety. Even when they pull away, if you look closely, they're still creating ways to keep you protected. They might check in quietly without making it obvious. They might step in to fix a problem you didn't even notice. They might stay silent during conflict, not to punish you, but because they don't want to say something they can't take back. That's their version of I love you. It's subtle, it's controlled, but it's real. Here's the paradox. They distance themselves not to hurt you, but because they believe that's the best way to protect the relationship. Deep down, many avoidants carry the belief that if they get too close, they'll mess it up. So they withdraw to preserve what they love. They think, if I pull back, I won't ruin this. If I stay quiet, I won't say something wrong. If I disappear for a bit, maybe I can come back when I feel safe enough to show love the right way. And that's why it's so powerful to reframe how you view their distance. Because while it may feel like abandonment, it's often a twisted form of devotion. They are doing the best they can with the emotional tools they have to keep you in their life. Love for them doesn't look like constant togetherness. It looks like managing closeness just enough to not lose it altogether. They are trying to hold on in the only way they know how. Once you recognize this, everything changes. You stop personalizing the distance. You stop chasing for verbal reassurance. You start seeing the hidden efforts that scream love without a single word being said. When someone avoids emotional intimacy, they may not flood you with compliments or say I love you on repeat. But if you're paying attention, and I mean really paying attention, you'll notice something extraordinary. They remember the smallest, most seemingly insignificant things about you. They might not express affection the way you expect, but they observe everything, every little detail. They remember how your mood shifts when you haven't eaten. They know which songs make you feel something, even if you never told them why. They pick up on how you twirl your hair when you're nervous, or how you get quiet before a storm of emotion. They store these tiny data points in silence, not because they're calculating, but because their love language is observation. Avoidants are internal processors. They feel deeply, but rarely out loud. And because expressing love verbally or emotionally feels risky or unsafe to them, they pour their attention into understanding you from a distance. That's how they feel close from behind a wall. And remembering small things about you becomes their silent way of saying, you matter to me, I'm paying attention, I see you, even if I don't say it. Most people miss this. They think love has to be loud to be real. They want grand gestures, daily affirmations, constant validation. But the avoidant gives love in a whisper, and often it's more consistent than the loudest shout. While others may say, I love you, and forget your birthday, the avoidant will remember how you like your coffee, where you left your keys, and what you said in passing 3 weeks ago when you thought they weren't listening. And that's the paradox. Avoidants aren't cold, they're cautious. They're not indifferent, they're intentional. They're watching the world through a different lens, and when they decide to focus that lens on you, that's no accident. That's intimacy on their terms. You can measure their care by the precision of their memory, the way they quietly adjust their actions based on your needs without needing credit. That's not randomness. That's not coincidence. That's how an avoidant says, I care, I remember, you are important to me. And once you understand this, You'll stop needing the words. You'll realize they've been screaming, "I love you," this whole time just through the little things you never thought to notice. One of the most misunderstood signs of love from an avoidant is how deeply uncomfortable they become when someone they care about is hurting. On the surface, it might look like they shut down, become cold, or seem emotionally unavailable. And that's where most people give up, thinking they just don't care. But the truth is far more complex and in many ways far more heartbreaking. Avoidants often learned early in life that emotions, especially big, vulnerable emotions, were dangerous. Maybe no one helped them regulate their feelings. Maybe they were shamed for crying or punished for needing too much. So, as adults, they internalize the idea that feeling is unsafe, that emotional expression leads to rejection or chaos. And when someone they love is in pain, it doesn't just trigger concern, it floods their nervous system. It activates the very wiring they've spent their whole lives trying to keep quiet. So what do? They freeze, they detach, they step back, not because they don't feel anything, but because they feel too much and they have no idea how to handle it. Here's what no one tells you: their silence during your pain isn't rejection. It's fear, it's overload, it's their entire emotional operating system short-circuiting because they do care, and caring deeply terrifies them. They're afraid of saying the wrong thing. They're afraid of being asked to emotionally show up in a way they were never taught. And most of all, they're afraid of failing you, so instead of leaning in, they pull back, hoping that by doing so, they can keep things calm. They think, if I stay quiet, maybe I won't make it worse. What they don't realize is that their silence does hurt. But it's coming from a place of inner panic, not indifference, and here's the proof that it's love. They'll think about that moment long after it's passed, replay it, wonder if they should have said more, regret not doing better, but they'll never tell you, because vulnerability still feels dangerous even when it's soaked in care. If you've ever seen an avoidant shut down when you were hurting, don't confuse that shutdown with lack of love. Often it's the deepest form of love they know how to give, struggling in silence, aching for you, and praying they don't make it worse by getting too close. For an avoidant, vulnerability isn't just difficult, it feels like walking into a battlefield without armor. It triggers every survival instinct they've developed over the years. So when an avoidant begins to open up, even just a little, you have to understand what's really happening beneath the surface. You're witnessing something sacred. Something rare, something that took enormous internal courage to express. Most avoidants didn't grow up in environments where vulnerability was safe. Somewhere along the way, they learned that opening up led to punishment, judgment, or abandonment. So instead of learning how to share their emotions, they learned how to suppress, avoid, and detach. They built thick emotional walls not because they wanted to be distant, but because their walls became their protection. And then you came along. If an avoidant begins to tell you things they don't tell others, things from their past, their fears, their mistakes, even their goals, you have to realize how monumental that is. They're not just making conversation, they're handing you a fragile piece of themselves, and for someone who's lived behind walls for so long, that act alone is terrifying. They may not pour their heart out in one long emotional confession, but they will drop little hints, tiny revelations, quiet disclosures, almost like they're testing the waters. Can I trust you with this part of me? Will you judge me? Will you still be here after I say this? And if you handle that moment with care, if you respond with understanding rather than pressure, they may give a little more. That process is their version of intimacy. Slowly, carefully, and often silently, they are peeling back layers they've never exposed before. Not because they have to, but because being around you feels safe enough for them to try. This is where real connection begins. Avoidants don't give their inner world away easily. They don't hand out their trust, their past, or their pain. So when they start to open up even just a little, it's not just about what they're saying. It's about what it costs them to say it. And if they choose you as the person to share it with, that's one of the loudest, most powerful ways they say, "I love you." When we think of love, many of us look for the obvious signs, the romantic texts, the public displays of affection, the constant reassurance. We expect love to be loud, visible, and continuous, but avoidants don't love that way. In fact, for them, Love shows up quietly, not in grand declarations, but in subtle consistency, in the way they show up for you again and again when it matters most. Avoidants aren't the ones who bombard you with messages every hour or pour their hearts out daily. That's not their language. Their love is more discreet, more measured. They might not always be present in the way you expect, but they will be reliable in moments that count. When you're in trouble, when life falls apart, when the world feels too heavy, they'll be there. Silently, maybe awkwardly, but undeniably there. This isn't accidental, it's intentional. Showing up in crisis or quietly solving a problem for you allows them to love you without the pressure of emotional vulnerability. It lets them express care through action rather than words. It's their comfort zone, and what many people miss is that this is their form of commitment. They may disappear sometimes when things get emotionally intense. They might even push you away temporarily when they feel overwhelmed, but then they return. They always do. That return, that coming back again and again, that's their version of holding on. It's not perfect. It's not easy, but it's real, and the deeper truth is this: consistency is sacred for an avoidant, because consistency means risk, to show up over and over, to be there for someone despite their own internal fears. That takes courage. That means something, and they won't do it for just anyone, so if they do it for you, it's not random, it's not out of obligation, it's because they've decided consciously or unconsciously that you're worth the discomfort. Their presence may be quiet, even confusing at times, but it's filled with meaning. Every act of service, every offer to help, every time they check in without being asked, it's all part of a silent pattern that says, I'm here, I might not say it, I might not show it the way you want, but I haven't left, and that's how you'll know I care. One of the most telling signs that an avoidant loves you deeply and silently is this: they begin to change in your presence, not because you force them to, not because you beg them to open up, but because something in you creates a space they've never known before. A space where emotional growth doesn't feel like a threat, it feels like freedom. Avoidants spend most of their lives carefully guarding their independence, their routines, their emotional privacy. They don't like being influenced by others, and they are highly sensitive to any feeling of control or pressure. But when an avoidant truly loves someone, something fascinating happens. They begin to mirror your growth. Subtly at first, quietly but undeniably. If you start doing inner work, they notice. If you regulate your emotions better, they feel safer. If you set boundaries lovingly instead of reacting emotionally, they begin to trust that intimacy doesn't have to mean chaos. And as that trust builds, you'll see little shifts in them: the way they communicate, the way they stay a little longer in hard conversations, the way they soften their defenses, not instantly, not consistently. But gradually, that change is not a performance, it's a sign, a powerful, sacred sign that they are letting love influence them, and that influence is stronger than their fear. Because for someone who's always been afraid of closeness, the greatest gift you can give isn't more affection, it's emotional stability, safety, the space to be seen and not judged. When they feel that from you, they start to experiment with new behaviors, opening up just a little more, asking about your feelings, admitting when they're struggling, and they're not doing it for approval. They're doing it because something inside of them wants to rise to meet the level of connection you've created. You see, love, when it's real, doesn't just comfort us, it grows us, it pulls us into our next evolution. And for the avoidant, that evolution looks like slowly learning to trust, to stay, to open up, all because your emotional presence showed them a new way of being. So no, they may not say, I love you. But if they are shifting, becoming better, more emotionally available, more aware, even if it's subtle, that change is speaking louder than words ever could. Love isn't always loud. It isn't always poetic. Sometimes love is shy, it's scared, it's cautious, and in the case of avoidant individuals, love doesn't come wrapped in declarations, it comes hidden inside behaviors that most people overlook. The avoidant doesn't say, I love you, often, but that doesn't mean they don't feel it deeply. It simply means they've been trained by trauma, by experience, by fear to protect their heart instead of reveal it, and so their love comes through in gestures, in silence, in timing, in growth. If you've ever felt unloved by an avoidant, this speech is your reminder. You may have been more loved than you ever realized, just in a language you didn't yet understand. Each of the behaviors we've explored the need for distance to create safety, the hyper-awareness of your small details, the shutdown when you're in pain, the slow and deliberate vulnerability, the quiet consistency, and the mirroring of your personal growth are all signs of something profound. They are signals from a guarded heart, trying to connect in the only way it knows how. These behaviors are not mistakes. They are not emotional defects. They are love in raw, unrefined form. And when you recognize them for what they are, you stop feeling abandoned and start feeling chosen not with words but with action. This kind of love asks you to look deeper, to drop your expectations of how love should look and tune into the subtle truth of what love actually is, especially when it comes from someone who's still learning how to give it. You see, the avoidant doesn't love lightly. If they've allowed you in, if they've shown you these 7 signs, then you have touched something in them that very few people ever reach. That love may not come with perfect communication or emotional fluency, but it comes with sincerity, protection, and growth. And sometimes that's the most powerful kind of love there is. So the next time you feel confused by their silence or frustrated by their distance, remember this: their love may not be spoken, but it's screaming through their actions. You just have to know where to listen, because love, real love, is not always heard in words. Sometimes it's found in the quiet places, in the patterns, the presence, the progress. And if you can learn to see it there, you'll realize. The avoidant didn't avoid love, they were loving you the whole time in the only way they knew how. Thank you so much for watching. If this message resonated with you, remember, healing begins with understanding. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every single one, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, share it with them. You never know whose life you might change. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon so you never miss a video that speaks to your soul. Until next time, take care of your heart, be kind to your inner child, and never stop growing. With gratitude and strength, goodbye for now.